Hey folks, welcome back. So, the goal of this session is to take a deeper dive into creating some basic Tableau reports. So, we looked at things like connecting to different data sources. We will look at a new concept today on live and extracts. Then we will drag and drop some data, we'll create some graphs, and then we'll slightly look at what are calculated columns, how to refresh extracts, and so on and so forth. All right. So in the last lecture, we saw connecting to Excel tabs and SQL Server and joining multiple data connections and ultimately creating a simple tabular report. So let's go ahead and play with Tableau a bit. Let's explore a new feature in Tableau called extracts. In Tableau, as I mentioned before, we can connect to live data source as well as a Tableau data source, right? So uh, Tableau data source, by what I mean by Tableau data source is it's basically an option called Tableau extract, where it pulls in data and then stores it into an internal Tableau database where it is optimized for speed. Now, my personal recommendation is to do that if possible. It'll greatly improve your report rendering speed. And again, you can set some refreshes, schedules, and stuff like that to kind of refresh the data inside the Tableau database. Now, this is what we call as a Tableau extract. So let's go ahead and quickly look at that. So if you remember, this is the Tableau data source that we created. So we connected to an Excel workbook. We dragged and dropped two tabs. We joined them. Now this example is actually from our previous video where we also have a SQL Server database connected. So this is basically what we did. And then we went ahead and clicked on the worksheet and created this report, right? So now one thing you observe is this connection says it's a live connection, right? And what it means is it is directly connecting to that Excel workbook and the SQL Server. It's not importing the data into its own database, right? So once we import the data, that's where Tableau does some magic and optimizes the data so that it can be even more faster. Now, how do we do that? It's basically we click on this button called extract. So as you can see, what it says is use an extract for better performance with the multi-connection data source. So I'm going to click on that. And by default, what it will do is it will actually pull in all the rows from whatever we have configured here, right, into its own database. Now again, if you don't want all the rows, suppose it's like 30 million rows or something like that, and if you're not interested in all the data in it and your report doesn't need all the data, you can very well go and edit, or you can add a filter where you can just say that only give me rows where modified date is greater than so on and so forth, right? You can do that and it will basically just get you that data. And it's worth exploring some other options as well, where you can actually configure a couple of other things in your filters, greater than, less than, equal to, and so on and so forth. We won't go too much in detail, but in the coming videos we will explore the concept of filters where the same window will appear in your report as well. All right, so we've done that, and this is basically the extract. All right, so let me go ahead and go to my report. And now what it is doing is it's actually rendering the report from the extract. So if you can right click and say extract data, it will actually pull in all the data from the Excel sheet and the SQL Server database. So you see importing data, and it will actually import it and then create its own little database. Now this is what I always recommend people, that if possible, go ahead and import it, because Tableau has its own optimization logic. All right, so if you see it says use extract and there's a check mark, that means it is using the extract at this point of time. All right, so in short, all these techniques will literally pull data from your upstream and store it locally in your Tableau database. So I personally like to create such databases or data sources ready-made, This way, my analyst can directly connect to this ready-made Tableau database and start creating reports. So think about it this way. They don't need to worry about data cleaning, upstreams, joining data, writing queries, all the things that we did in the last two lectures, right? They can just connect to this particular data source and directly start creating these reports. So they will get these dimensions and measures as soon as they connect to this particular data source, right? So it's that simple. Now, you could definitely do that and then set some sort of a schedule where it can, run every 12 hours and then pull in data from your upstreams, and then it'll keep refreshing it, right? So you can set as a multiple times a day refresh. Now, all that sounds good, but you're creating this on your laptop, right? So how does somebody in your organization use this particular data source? How do you share this database so that anybody can connect? So it's essentially the same way as you would do a Tableau report, right? Tableau has something called as, deploying or publishing this to a Tableau server. It can be an on-premise or, that's maintained by our company, or it can be Tableau Cloud, right? So the way we do it is just right click and say publish to server, right? And there will be a URL that your administrator will provide, and then you say connect, and then you go ahead and just publish it. Now, anyone who is basically an analyst need not create this. All he needs to do is go to data source, click add, and then there is an option called Tableau server. Let me new data source, and then there is a Tableau server where he would type in that URL, and the data source that you just published would just appear there, and he would just connect it. After connecting, he would actually get these dimensions and measures, right? So I don't worry about it for now. I will put some reading materials where you can actually read about it as well. All right, so let's move on, right? So far we have only seen tabular data. Now let's explore some graphs, right? After all, Tableau is really good at visualization, really good at line charts, bar charts, pie charts. So it'll be interesting to look at that as well. So let me go ahead and just show you something simple. I'll go ahead and create a sheet, and let me call this as world indicators, and I'll call this as graph, right? So what we are precisely going to use is this portion, right? It has some ready-made graphs here, right? And this is basically your pre-baked graphs, and we are precisely going to use this. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to drag and drop a measure. So let me see. So I will drag and drop this one, passenger cars, and this is total, right? And what else? I can go ahead and actually drag and drop, let's say date, right? So we have dates and we have passenger counts. So this is a typical tabular report, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on this option which looks like a line chart, and magically this will convert into a line chart, right? So you have the dates or the years on the x-axis, and then the passenger cars on the y-axis, right? So this is looking really good. Now I wanted to show you a couple of more things, right? So one of the things is if you drag and drop this passenger cars into this icon called labels, it will actually label them here. So this marks section is actually pretty interesting, right? There is tons of things you can do with colors, labels, path, tooltips, and we'll look at this more in depth as we go on in further videos. So tooltip is nothing but, if you hover on this, you see that particular information. Now all this information is highly customizable, right? You can actually write an English sentence which says, hey, the passenger count was way about 10,000. You can dynamically kind of create those sentences as well. So we'll look at that more as we go on in the further lectures. All right, so other thing I wanted to show you is this particular plus sign that appears. Now if your date has more granular data like month, week, days, you can keep drilling it down. It depends on what data is out there. So that's kind of it. All right. So yeah, one more thing I wanted to show you is, even though you have connected to a data source, you can kind of go ahead and rename this as you want, right? So let me go ahead and do something like this, right? Just click on rename, and then I can just type something like this: renamed, or subregion all, right? Whatever comes to your mind. Similarly, you can go and rename the data source name as well. So these are just plain simple stuff like you would do in Microsoft Word or something like that. All right. I will have a separate session on something called calculated columns, but kind of let me just give you, an example. When you right click, there are a bunch of options here, and one of the options is to create a calculated field. Now, calculated field is nothing but what you do is you have all these existing columns or existing attributes. You kind of make use of them and create a new column, right? So imagine that you had an attribute called first name and last name. You could create a calculation called full name where you just append first name and last name, right? So let me kind of show you an example. I'll call this as sample calculation. And just to give you some reference, you can really write some very complex calculations. And what I'll do is I'll create a separate lecture just to show you about calculations, right? So there is tons of things you can use, tons of functions you can use. There is string manipulation functions, there is logical functions. So you can really write very complex code. But for now, let me just keep it very simple. So what I'll do is I'll just say, as soon as I start typing, it shows me the attributes. So region plus, and then it'll just put a string over there and then say subregion. Okay. So what I'm doing is just region and then followed by parenthesis subregion, and I'm just putting it out there. And it says the calculation is valid. Click OK, and you see that the sample calculation appeared here, right? And I can kind of even, let's actually create let's go back to the tabular form. I'll put this as rows, and let me go ahead and drag and drop the sample calculation. So you see that it has appended it. So now this is actually a very simple calculation. You can really write some very complex calculations as well. Okay. All right. So the next thing I wanted to show you is something called as hierarchies, right? So hierarchy is nothing but, it's kind of a drill down. So let me show you this. So if I drag and drop country and drag and drop region and drag and drop subregion, it's kind of hierarchical in nature, right? And what I can do is I can kind of create a pre-calculated, dimension, which basically looks like this hierarchy. And the way I do it is basically, you can kind of hold the ones that you want to include in hierarchy and then just drag and drop into, the other attribute. So what I'm doing is I'm going to drag and drop region and subregion into country. Oops, this already has a hierarchy. So let me just remove the hierarchy and show you. So I'm going to drag and drop region and subregion, and I'm just going to put it over the country, and it says, do you want to create this hierarchy? I click OK. Now if I drag and drop just this one attribute, it allows me to drill down. Look at this plus sign. It allows me to drill down even further, right? So this is basically hierarchy. Naturally, it becomes more easier for you when you have geographical attributes to create this kind of a hierarchy. So awesome. So to summarize, we saw some basics of Tableau. We saw how to join data connections, connecting to Excel, SQL Server, and others. We had a look at extract versus live connections. We created tabular reports. We created some awesome charts, right? Some line charts. We basically used the text in it, like we displayed some numbers in it. We used labels. We briefly saw calculations. Again, don't worry too much about it. We'll have a separate lecture. And we also saw the concept of hierarchies, right? So at this point, you should be comfortable playing with some data and creating some basic reports. So I would encourage you to read some of the materials given in the documents before you watch the next lecture. So I have some white papers, some videos, and some additional reference material which will tell you how to publish a data source and use them and so on and so forth. So see you soon.